He forces his pregnant wife to sleep in a dog shed until the mafia boss makes him regret it. He crouched down beside the dog shed and pressed his ear to the rotting wood. A voice, faint, broken, human. He aimed his flashlight through the crack, and what he saw made something snap behind his eyes. She was 8 months pregnant, curled on a frozen dirt floor, whispering promises to a child who hadn't been born yet. A padlock held the door shut from the outside. Inside the house, her husband was laughing. But the headlights that cut across that yard tonight belonged to the one man on earth who'd been searching for her for 9 years, and he didn't come alone. What he did next? Her husband never saw it coming. Lena Calloway, 8 months pregnant, locked in a dog shed by the very man who swore to protect her. But the man crouching outside that door has been hunting for her for 9 years, and tonight, the debt comes due. Subscribe and hit that bell, because you won't believe how this got here, or what comes next. The Wyoming night had teeth. Wind tore across the flatland and slammed into the Phelan property like something trying to break in. Behind the house, a dog shed sat low against the fence line. The wood was warped, the roof sagged, and the stench of rot and old animal waste bled through every crack. Inside that shed, Lena Calloway pressed her back against the wall and wrapped both arms around her swollen belly. 27 years old, 8 months pregnant, barefoot on frozen dirt in a cotton dress thin as paper. Her wrists carried bruises in the shape of fingers, dark purple layered over fading yellow-green from the week before. A crusted gash sat above her left eyebrow, where Wade had slammed her face into the kitchen counter 3 nights ago for serving his plate too slowly. Boone, the old hound, pressed against her side. His ribs showed through his coat, but he stayed. He always stayed. The only living thing in that house that still treated her like she mattered. Lena whispered to her belly, "I'm going to get you out of here, baby. I promise you won't live like this." Inside the house, Wade Phelan sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey and a grin that looked wrong, too loose, too satisfied. His mother, Darlene, stood behind him, nodding along like everything he said was gospel. "She looked at me in front of Ray Cutler," Wade said, slamming the bottle down. "Looked me dead in the eye like she had the right." "And you set her straight," Darlene said, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That's what a man does." Curtis Phelan, Wade's younger brother, sat in the corner with a plate he hadn't touched. He didn't speak. He hadn't spoken up in 2 years. Not when Wade split Lena's lip with the back of his hand. Not when Darlene poured cold water over Lena's head for burning the cornbread. Not when Wade dragged her by the hair across the yard and threw her into the shed like trash. Curtis saw everything and did nothing. Then, headlights. 3 sets, sweeping across the front gate in slow arcs. The rumble came next, deep and heavy. One black SUV rolled to a stop, then a second, then a third, lined up like a procession that had nothing to do with mourning and everything to do with reckoning. The laughter inside the house died. Wade lurched to his feet. Darlene grabbed his arm. Curtis stared through the window, pale and wide-eyed, as dark figures emerged from the vehicles in perfect sync. The last door to open was the center SUV. Jude Graves stepped into the Wyoming wind. 6'2", broad-shouldered, dark hair pushed back from a face that gave away nothing. A jagged scar ran from his left elbow to his wrist. His dark eyes swept the property and missed nothing. Macon Sharp fell into step beside him. One look from Jude, and Macon peeled off toward the back of the house. Wade shoved through the screen door. "Who the hell are you? This is private property." Jude's voice came out low and final. "I'm looking for a woman. Ain't no woman here but my wife. She's none of your business." Darlene screeched from the doorway. "Call Sheriff Dawes, Curtis. These men are trespassing." Curtis didn't move. Around back, Macon stopped in front of the dog shed. A brand new padlock gleamed against the rotting wood, locked from the outside. He crouched and listened. A voice inside. Human. Then a low, protective growl. He was back in seconds. "Boss, there's someone in the dog shed." Wade's face turned the color of ash. Jude walked to the shed without a word. He crouched beside the door, aimed his flashlight through the crack, and what he saw turned his blood to ice. A pregnant woman curled on the ground, starving, bruised, an old dog standing guard over her, too weak to fight but refusing to move. "Open it." Macon popped the lock. The door swung wide. Jude lowered himself to one knee, and his voice dropped to something his men had never heard. Soft, careful, human. "No one's here to hurt you." Lena trembled, arms locked around her belly. She looked toward the house where Wade's shadow paced. Wade burst out the back door, face twisted. "Let my wife go. She's mine." Macon caught him by the collar and drove him into the dirt. He didn't get back up. Jude turned to Lena. Dark eyes met pale green ones filled with terror, confusion, and something almost dead, hope. "Do you want to stay, or do you want to go? It's your choice." A choice. Lena stared at him like the word had lost its meaning. For 2 years, nobody asked what she wanted. She ate what Wade allowed, wore what Wade permitted, spoke when Wade decided she could. She had forgotten what it felt like to own a single decision. She looked at Wade on the ground. She looked at the shed, the frozen dirt, the filth, the dark. She felt her baby move inside her, and something in her spine straightened. She stood. Her legs shook, but they held. "I want to go." She looked down at Boone, pressing against her ankles. "The dog." Jude nodded to Macon without hesitation. "Bring him." Lena walked to the SUV, one step at a time. Every step carried 2 years of silence and bruises, and wondering what she did to deserve this life. For the first time in 2 years, she chose herself. In the back seat, blanket around her shoulders, Boone at her feet, she looked at the man across from her. "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" Jude held her gaze. "You'll know. But first, you need a hospital." The SUV disappeared into the black Wyoming night. Lena was free. But she had no idea the man sitting across from her had spent 9 years searching for the girl with pale green eyes. The girl who once saved his life and asked for nothing in return. 9 years earlier, a winter storm swallowed the Wyoming mountains whole. Thunder split the sky like cannon fire. Rain came down in sheets so thick the tree line disappeared. The wind howled through the valley as if the earth itself were screaming. At the edge of the forest, a small wooden house sat buried under the weight of the storm. Smoke crawled from the chimney and vanished into the black sky. Inside, the fire was burning low, and the warmth was fading fast. Opal Wind sat beside the hearth, her wrinkled hands moving with quiet precision, guiding a needle through white cloth. Wild columbine flowers bloomed under her fingertips in deep blue thread, with the letter O stitched into the corner, her signature, sewn into every piece she made. Across from her, Lena sat watching every stitch. She was 18, her dark brown hair tied back, her pale green eyes following her grandmother's hands like they held the secret to everything good in the world. Their life was small, not wealthy, but it was full of love, full of thread and firelight, and the quiet rhythm of 2 people who only had each other. Opal had found Lena when she was 5 years old, abandoned on a frozen road in the dead of winter. She took her home, raised her, taught her to sew, taught her to create beauty with her hands. From that night on, Opal was the only family Lena had ever known. "Go fetch more firewood from the shed, child," Opal said gently. "These old bones can't take much more of this cold." Lena pulled on a wool sweater and pushed out into the storm. Rain lashed her face. Wind cut through her skin. The shed was only 30 steps from the house, but in weather like this, it felt like a mile. She had just shoved the shed door open when she heard it. A low moan, barely audible beneath the roar of the storm. She turned. Lightning cracked across the sky and lit up a body collapsed face down in the mud just beyond the shed. Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. A man, late 20s, pale as death. Blood. So much blood it swirled into the rainwater and spread across the ground in dark ribbons. A deep stab wound gaped in his left arm, another in his side. His clothes were torn and soaked through. Every instinct told her to run. But Opal's voice rang in her memory, the same words she'd heard 100 times. "Sheriff Pratt only protects people with money. For people like us, he only brings more trouble." Lena dropped to her knees. His chest rose and fell, barely, stubbornly. He was alive, but he wouldn't be for long. She didn't know what strength let her drag a man twice her weight into that shed. She laid him on dry straw, then ran back for warm water, clean cloth, and anything she could find to stop the bleeding. Opal heard the commotion and made her way out, leaning on her cane. She stood in the shed doorway, looked at her granddaughter kneeling beside a stranger soaked in blood, and said nothing for a long moment. Then her voice came, low and deep. "You're planting a seed. May it grow into something good." She went back inside and returned with more cloth and her embroidered handkerchief, the one with the columbine flowers and the letter O in the corner. Lena worked through the night. She rinsed the wounds, pressed clean cloth against the gash in his side, fought the bleeding that wouldn't stop. The wound on his arm was the worst, deep and relentless. She reached for Opal's handkerchief, wrapped it tight around the wound, and tied it until the blood finally held. The blue columbine flowers turned dark red, but they did their job. 5 nights she kept watch. The first 2, the fever nearly killed him, his body burning, sweat soaking through the straw, delirious words spilling from his mouth like broken glass. Lena didn't sleep. She changed bandages, dripped water onto cracked lips, pulled blankets on, and stripped them off as the fever surged and retreated. On the 3rd night, he woke. His eyes opened in the dim light of the oil lamp, dark, sharp, searching. The only thing he could make out clearly was her gaze, pale green, steady, looking back at him like 2 stones at the bottom of a clear river. "Who are you?" His voice was raw. "It doesn't matter." He tried to sit up. The wound in his side dropped him flat. "Why did you save me?" "Because you'd die if I didn't." He watched her, suspicion and disbelief fighting across his face. "Aren't you afraid I'm a bad man?" Lena's hand paused on the blood-stained handkerchief around his arm. Then she spoke, gentle, but certain. "Bad or good, you're still a human life." By the 5th night he could stand. He stood in the shed doorway looking at the sky softening toward dawn. He turned back holding a thick fold of cash. Lena shook her head. He frowned. "You saved my life." She didn't blink. "I didn't do it for money." He looked at her one last time. "At least tell me your name." Her pale green eyes held steady against his dark ones in the gray light of morning. "You don't need my name. You just need to live. And don't come back." He nodded slowly. He looked at the embroidered handkerchief still wrapped around his arm. Columbine flowers soaked in dried blood. He didn't take it off. He carried it with him. Opal stood in the doorway of the house, watching the stranger's shape dissolve into the morning fog. Lena stood beside her, watching until there was nothing left to see. "You did the right thing," Opal said. Lena nodded, turned inside, and started breakfast. As if the last 5 nights had been nothing but a passing dream. That stranger was Jude Graves, and he vanished into the mist, carrying the handkerchief and the memory of green eyes that told him to live. Lena never thought she'd see him again. She was wrong. 4 years after that stormy night, Opal died in her sleep, quietly, peacefully, without a single goodbye. Lena found her in the morning, face serene, hands folded as if she'd simply decided it was time. Lena held her grandmother's body and pressed her head to Opal's chest, the way she had when she was 5 years old. A child with no one, clinging to the only woman who ever loved her. The funeral was small. A few neighbors came, offered words, and left. Lena stood alone beside the fresh grave at 22 years old, with no family, no friends, and a silence in the house that stole her breath. A year later, Wade Phelan walked into her sewing shop, carrying his dead father's jacket. He was polite, attentive. He knew she was an orphan. He knew she had no one. And he used it. 6 months of flowers, sweet words, and promises she'd never be alone again. Lena said yes, not out of love, but out of desperation. And desperation makes people blind. After the wedding, everything changed. First the money, then the drinking. Then Darlene moved in with her poisoned tongue. In the 7th month, Wade hit Lena for the first time. An open hand across the face that sent her to the kitchen floor, with her ears ringing. By the 9th month, the dog shed became her punishment. locked inside whenever she displeased him, whenever she dared to have a voice. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Seattle, Jude Graves sat in a dark office holding a frayed handkerchief he'd kept for 9 years. He was now the most powerful man in the Pacific Northwest. But 9 years of searching had never found the girl with pale green eyes. Until now. A new forensic technique lifted the dried blood from the cloth and revealed the Columbine embroidery, tracing it to Opal Wynn, deceased, but survived by an adopted granddaughter, Lena Calloway, married to Wade Phelan. Jude read Wade's file. History of violence. Prior assault charge dropped. His fist clenched until his knuckles cracked white. He sent Macon to watch. A week of reports came back, each one worse than the last. Lena doing heavy labor while pregnant, bruises on her arms, Wade screaming at her in public. Then Macon called at midnight, his voice tight with fury. "Boss, he locked her in the dog shed. She's pregnant and he locked her in a dog shed." Jude was on his feet before the sentence ended. 3 vehicles, full detail. We leave now. 2 hours after leaving the felon property, the SUV pulled into a hospital in a city far enough from Wade's reach that Sheriff Dawes and his crooked badge meant nothing. Jude had arranged everything before they arrived. Private room, top floor, security at the door around the clock. Lena was laid onto crisp, white sheets, and the shock of it nearly broke her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd lain on something soft, without fearing she'd be ripped out of sleep by Wade's fists, or the sound of the padlock snapping shut. The door opened, and a woman walked in. White-haired, mid-50s, eyes warm but sharp. Dr. Margot Avery. The same woman who had secretly examined Lena at the clinic months ago. The only person who had ever looked at Lena's bruises and not turned away. Jude had contacted her the moment they left the property, and she'd flown in that same night. Dr. Avery examined Lena carefully. Her expression hardened with every finding. Blood pressure dangerously high, severe malnutrition. Old bruises layered beneath new ones across her arms, back, and ribs. A cracked rib that had never been treated. The gash above her eyebrow still raw. But the baby was healthy. A miracle wrapped inside a nightmare. Dr. Avery sat beside the bed and took Lena's hand. "You've endured far too long. But you did the right thing when you left." The tears broke like a dam. Lena sobbed for every night in the dog shed, every blow absorbed in silence. For Opal's silver Columbine pendant that Wade ripped from her neck and pawned for whiskey. For the loneliness of suffering in a house full of people who either enjoyed her pain or pretended it didn't exist. Dr. Avery held her close. 20 years ago, I sat exactly where you're sitting. I thought it was fate. I was wrong. You're stronger than you think." That night, Lena found Jude sitting alone by a window at the end of the corridor. She sat beside him. He told her pieces of his past. Orphan, streets at 16, a world he didn't choose but learned to survive. Then he reached into his jacket and set something on the table between them. Lena looked down, and her heart stopped. Opal's handkerchief, faded Columbine flowers, the letter O in the corner, dried blood still staining the cloth. Her fingers trembled. "Why do you have this?" "A girl used it to save my life 9 years ago on a stormy night." Lena's gaze dropped to the scar on his left arm. She had washed that wound. She had bound it with this very cloth. "You're the man from that night, and I've been looking for you for 9 years." Lena told him plainly. She was grateful, but she wouldn't trade one man's control for another. She decided her own life. Jude accepted without hesitation. She asked for a lawyer. She wanted a divorce. Jude arranged the best. Days passed. Lena stabilized. Then the peace shattered. Wade Phelan wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat. He used every connection he had, and Sheriff Dawes helped him track Lena down. On the 3rd morning, shouting erupted in the hospital lobby. Wade stormed in, face flushed with liquor and rage, waving papers like a weapon. Dawes followed in his Pinewood uniform, trying to project authority he didn't have outside his own county. "This is a family matter," Dawes blustered. "Outsiders shouldn't interfere between a man and his wife." Macon blocked their path. You don't have authority here. Then Jude stepped from the corridor. His voice cut through the noise like ice through glass. I'm the man you don't want as your enemy. Dawes recognized who he was facing and went pale. But Wade, too drunk and too stupid to stop, kept screaming. She's my wife. The law's on my side. The elevator doors opened. Lena stepped out in a hospital gown, pregnant belly heavy, face drawn. But her pale green eyes burned with something no one had seen in 2 years. She'd heard Wade's shouting from her room. I want to speak to him. Jude wanted to stop her, but he remembered her words. I decide my own life. He stepped back. Wade saw her and shifted instantly. The rage melted into something sickly sweet. Baby, I've missed you. Come home with me. Lena looked at the face she once believed would be her refuge, and for the first time in 2 years, she met his eyes without flinching. You locked me in a dog shed. I got angry. I'm sorry. You've apologized 37 times, I counted, and 37 times you hit me after. She listed everything, the beatings, the nights in the shed, Opal's necklace pawned for liquor. She looked at Dawes, cowering to the side. Sheriff Dawes, you saw the bruise on my face at the grocery store. You saw it and turned your head like I didn't exist. Dawes couldn't meet her eyes. Jude's voice rang out cold and final. Leave, both of you, and don't show your faces near her again. Wade was dragged out screaming. This isn't over, Eliza. I'll take back what's mine. The door slammed. His voice faded into nothing. Back in Wyoming, Wade spiraled. His lawyer quit after seeing the evidence. Dawes was under investigation from an anonymous tip and couldn't help anymore. Darlene screamed at her son daily, calling him weak, calling him pathetic, demanding he go take back his wife. One night, Wade staggered to the shed behind the house and dug through the junk until he found what he was looking for, his father's old pistol. He checked the bullets and shoved it into his waistband. Curtis stood in the doorway watching. His voice came out shaking. What are you going to do with that? Wade turned, his bloodshot eyes lit with something unhinged. Take back what's mine. You're going to hurt her. Wade stepped closer, his face warped into something barely human, and whispered cold as ice. If I can't have her, nobody gets to. He got in his truck and tore off into the night. Curtis stood alone, trembling. He stared at the empty dog shed. He remembered Lena's muffled sobs drifting through the walls on freezing nights. The pleading look she gave him every time he walked past. And what had he done? Looked away. For 2 years. His hand shook as he pulled out his phone. If he made this call, he'd betray his brother, destroy his family. His mother would never forgive him. But if he didn't, Lena could die. The baby could die. And he'd carry that blood for the rest of his life. He dialed 911. My brother has a gun. He's driving to the hospital to find his wife. Please, stop him before he does something terrible. Curtis had been silent for 2 years. But there are moments when silence becomes a crime. And tonight, he decided he wouldn't commit one more. Dawn hadn't broken yet when the screaming started. Travis had slipped through a side entrance of the hospital, pistol tucked beneath his jacket, bloodshot eyes sweeping every corridor as he searched for Lena's room. A nurse passed him, caught the outline of the weapon under his clothes, and her scream tore through the quiet like a siren. Alarms wailed, staff scrambled, patients were rushed behind locked doors. But Wade didn't care. He'd found what he was looking for. He stopped in front of Lena's door, ripped the gun free, and aimed it straight ahead. His voice came out ragged, soaked in liquor and madness. Open this door, Lena. I know you're in there. Jude and Macon appeared at the far end of the hall, weapons drawn, both aimed directly at Wade. Jude's voice was ice. Put the gun down, Phelan. Wade swung the barrel toward them, hands trembling, eyes wild like a cornered animal who'd chewed through his own leash. You stole my wife. Who do you think you are? You think you can just come take everything that belongs to me? Then the hospital room door opened. Lena stepped out. Jude's chest seized. He wanted to shout for her to go back inside, wanted to rush forward and pull her behind him. But Lena looked at him with pale green eyes that were impossibly calm, and she said 2 words. "Let me." She walked toward Wade, not hurried, not trembling, one steady step after another, as if the loaded weapon pointed at her chest were nothing more than a finger raised in accusation. Wade saw her coming and the gun shifted, aimed directly at her. But his hand was shaking so hard the barrel couldn't hold still, and his voice cracked from rage into something pitiful. "Come home with me, please. I miss you, Lena." Lena stopped 3 steps away and looked directly into the bloodshot eyes of the man who had turned 2 years of her life into a waking nightmare. She didn't step back. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. "You locked me in a dog shed while I was carrying your child." Wade opened his mouth, but Lena didn't give him the chance. "You beat me until I couldn't stand, and then told me to apologize. You took the only thing my grandmother left me and sold it so you could drink yourself blind. You cracked my rib and told me I fell. You slammed my face into the counter and told me I deserved it." Her voice didn't waver. Every word landed like a hammer strike. "That's not love, Wade. Love doesn't lock a pregnant woman on a frozen floor with a dog. Love doesn't split someone's lip for looking up when they should have kept their head down. You don't love me. You never did. You wanted to own me. You wanted me so afraid I wouldn't even breathe too loud." Wade trembled. The gun wavered in his grip. I love you. You don't know what that word means." Police sirens screamed outside. Curtis's call had brought them. Within seconds, officers flooded the corridor from both ends, weapons trained on Wade from every direction. He was surrounded. Nowhere to run. Nowhere left to hide behind. Wade looked around at the gun barrels pointed at him, then back at Lena. His voice went small, pathetic, like a child caught breaking something precious and realizing he could never put it back together. "Why don't you love me?" Lena looked at him. Her green eyes held no fear, no hatred, only a steady, unshakable clarity. "Because you never let me. You only made me afraid." The gun slipped from Wade's fingers and clanged against the hospital floor. He dropped to his knees. Police rushed in, cuffed him, and hauled him upright. He thrashed and screamed. "Lena, don't leave me. You're mine. You belong to me." But Lena had already turned away. She didn't look back. She didn't say another word. Then the pain hit, sudden and fierce, sharp enough to double her over. She braced herself against the wall. Warm fluid ran down her legs. Her baby had decided this was the moment. She was rushed to the delivery room. Pain came fast and violent. Dr. Avery was at her side in seconds, gripping her hand, voice steady as a lighthouse. "You're doing beautifully, Lena. She's ready. Breathe. That's it." Outside, Jude paced the corridor like a man coming apart at the seams. He had faced death more times than he could count, built an empire from nothing, stared down men who would have killed him without blinking. But this, standing outside a door he couldn't open, waiting for a sound he couldn't control. This was the first time Jude Graves had ever felt truly helpless. Inside, between waves of pain that felt like they were tearing her in half, Lena's mind drifted to Opal. She remembered being 5 years old, alone on a frozen road, and a wrinkled hand closing around hers. A gentle voice saying, "From now on, you have a home." Tears ran down her face. "Grandma, I'm going to be a mother. I wish you were here." Dr. Avery called out, "Push, Lena. One more. She's almost here." Lena gathered everything she had, every ounce of strength forged through 2 years of suffering, and pushed. And then she heard it. Her daughter's first cry. Clear, strong, unmistakable, like a bell announcing dawn after the longest night. Dr. Avery placed the baby in her arms. A little girl, perfectly healthy. "You did it, Lena." Lena held her daughter to her chest and looked down at the tiny face, red and wailing and impossibly alive. She whispered through tears that had nothing to do with pain. "Hello, baby. I kept my promise. I brought you somewhere safe." She named her Opal. Later, Jude was allowed in. The most dangerous man in the Pacific Northwest stood in the doorway, looking awkward as a schoolboy on his first day. He looked at Lena holding her daughter, exhaustion and radiance fighting for control of her face, and something shifted in his chest that he had no name for. "Thank you," Lena said softly, "for giving my daughter the chance to be born in safety." Jude sat beside the bed, his eyes on the baby sleeping in her mother's arms. "She's so small." Lena laughed, and Jude realized it was the first time he had ever heard her truly laugh. Wade's trial came 6 weeks later. The evidence was a mountain: medical records, photographs, Dr. Avery's testimony, hospital security footage. But the moment that broke the case open was Curtis Phelan taking the witness stand. He looked at his brother and said, voice shaking but clear, "I saw him hit her. I saw him lock her in the dog shed. I heard her crying every night. I stayed silent because I was afraid, because he's my brother, because my mother said it was family business. But silence made me an accomplice, and I can't carry that anymore." Darlene leapt from the gallery screaming, "Traitor! You're no son of mine!" She was dragged out, still shrieking. Curtis watched her go, eyes wet, face steady, no regret. Wade was sentenced to 12 years. Sheriff Dawes was forced to resign in disgrace. 6 months later, Lena moved to a new town. She rented a small house with her own money, reopened her sewing business, Opal's Thread, and built it stitch by stitch into something that mattered. The shop quietly became a refuge for women fleeing the same darkness she'd escaped. Jude provided support from the shadows, but Lena ran everything. Every decision was hers. Jude visited, but never pushed. He brought toys for baby Opal, sat on the floor and played with her while Lena sewed. He asked for nothing, expected nothing. And slowly, Lena watched the cold, controlled man she'd met that night begin to change, learning that strength wasn't force, that love wasn't possession, that protecting someone meant giving them room to stand on their own. One autumn night, after baby Opal had fallen asleep, Lena reached over and took Jude's hand on the porch beneath a sky full of stars. "I want to try." Slowly. Jude smiled, something rare and real. "I waited 9 years to find you. I can wait as long as you need." Lena kissed him first, gentle, unhurried. He stayed still and let her lead. The following week, Jude arrived with a small velvet box. Inside, Opal's silver columbine pendant, the one Wade had stolen and pawned. Jude had spent a year tracking it through secondhand shops across 3 states. Lena broke down the moment she saw it. He fastened it around her neck and said, "This isn't repaying a debt. This is love." On a late autumn morning, Lena carried baby Opal to her grandmother's grave. She placed fresh columbine flowers on the stone and whispered, "I found my way, Grandma. I'm not afraid anymore." She reached out to Curtis, told him his courage on the stand was the final key to her freedom. The boy who'd been silent for 2 years finally used his voice when it mattered most, and Lena made sure he knew it changed everything. The story closes where it began, with a woman who once had nothing, standing in a shop filled with sunlight, her daughter playing on the floor, an old dog resting faithfully beside her, and a man walking through the door who learned that the strongest thing he ever did was not use his strength. Some debts never expire, but sometimes they turn into something no one expected. Not obligation, not repayment, just 2 people who found each other and chose to stay. Lena learned that real love doesn't demand silence. It doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't lock doors from the outside. Real love gives you wings, and then stands back to watch you fly. And Jude learned that real power was never the empire, never the fear, never the control. Real power was the ability to kneel beside a broken door, offer a hand, and wait, patiently, quietly, for someone to take it on their own terms. If you made it this far, you felt something. We know you did. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss another one. Somewhere out there, someone needs to know they're not alone, that they can walk out, that they can start over. that a better life isn't just a dream. Ring that notification bell. We'll see you in the next one.